Why do women support causes that are contrary to their own interests?
Hello, and welcome to the Perspicath podcast. We've been speaking a lot about men, and last week we spoke about dads, and this week we decided to do a dive into the femisphere. Why is it that women seem to be supporting so many social causes that are contrary to their own interests? We put forward our own theories and do a little dive into what might be called toxic femininity. Enjoy. To connect it to the manosphere and connect to how, we were talking about what's going on with men and women's
What's the woman
responsibility or
equivalent of
contribution.
that?
Exactly. And what is it that we're seeing? And also, again, I think to try to be women who are outside of those particular movements. So to go, I don't agree with those things, or I feel differently. And maybe if more women knew that other women didn't actually agree, then we would be less likely to all congregate around these particular ideas. But maybe just to why are they going after these things? Why do women care about these particular movements? Why? Because there was also another thing on Twitter, which someone had written this article about how the trans movement is so female dominated in terms of the women who are supporting it and the women who are pushing it. And yet it is so misogynistic and it is so anti-women in so many aspects. So why do women go for those things? Why do women seem to be pro-Palestine in the way that they are, considering the things that happened on October the 7th, but also just generally to be pro the Islamic world, which doesn't have a great track record in terms of its treatment of women? There's all these sorts of inconsistencies that I don't agree with. There's also things like how women were so excited about Kamala Harris becoming potentially the president, and it was all because she's a woman. And yet, when you see someone like Kemi Badenoch, who is in the UK, being the head of the Conservative Party, and none of the feminists are like, oh my gosh, we all have to support Kemi because she's a woman. They're all supporting the Greens, who are led by Zach Polanski, who became famous because he was hypnotizing women to think that their breasts could get bigger.
Okay, so just a broad question. Why do women support causes that are contrary to their own interests?
Yeah, exactly. What is it?
So from my perspective, the simple answer is there's a compassion element and an empathy element. Maybe that errs on the side of it's less about the outworking consequences and the bigger picture and more about the immediate person in front of them and wanting to help, wanting to feel compassion. That for me is at least the best case, most honorable side of it. I think worst case is virtue signaling, and by supporting anyone who seems to be the underdog, you position yourself as someone who cares. So it can be the same thing, but for one, the intention is genuine care and compassion for the people who are marginalized and suffering or at the mercy of some of these in some of these cases, which are not wrong. I think it's also being mindful that when you do tap into the algorithm on social media, especially, that drives and fuels a lot of this stuff, you won't find the same content that you find on the news or by journalists or by YouTube channels. I think that's also something to bear in mind. And so from my perspective, and having friends who are on the side of a lot of these movements, that logic and reason and the outworking shows have not been beneficial to women. When you look at the kind of rhetoric that's been displayed, you can sort of understand why someone who is maybe more emotionally driven, and I don't want to say emotionally as in can't think for themselves, but in MBTI, it's your feelings or thinking, right? So your logic and reason and your values driven reason, your values driven feeling. So I think that's maybe where we need to then be a bit compassionate on that side, at least from my side. I'm trying to build that kind of compassion, is to say, okay, this is someone who's driven by a sense of justice, compassion, empathy, those are sort of the things and the strengths that they have. And so they see people in suffering and don't really concern themselves necessarily with the bigger context or the bigger strategy or the bigger, issue at hand. But for them, they've just seen people in suffering, and there's an outcry because, there's something internal in us that wants to protect the weak. That's what I'm going with in terms of best case scenario. Worst case is to protect your own privilege and sense of guilt. You align yourself to causes that make you seem important, compassionate, willing to do the sacrifice because you're posting a black square on your profile picture. But actually, there isn't a lot of work being done. And I think there was a statistic around this in, blue states and red states in America. This idea of there are a lot of causes and there are a lot of people, standing up for the right thing. But actually, when it comes to helping the actual people, there isn't actually much being done. And I think that's where it sort of gets interesting, is the people who shout about the protection and the rights and the blah, 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 but their lives don't actually reflect that. So I think that's sort of the extreme version I see. I don't know what some of your initial thoughts are. You've caught me way off guard, which I'm very, I'm like, that's cool. We're going this way. All good.
This is the direction we're going in.
Let's apply the brain. And actually, I think sometimes it's better like this because it also helps me see what are my initial thoughts, biases.
Yes.
But I'm going to catch you off guard next time.
Great.
I'll bring the question next time.
I want to jump on a couple of things that you've said. And firstly, also to kind of link them to some things that we've said before. So I think what's really nice to start off with is the kernel of truth, right? So what's the kernel of truth that women are generally responding to, and the things that they are legitimately concerned about? So like what we were talking about with the manosphere, and now we're looking at the femisphere, if we can call them that, and thinking about, okay, what is it that they are touching on that's true and has validity. And I think also there's an interesting point to be made, like what you were saying, that that women are generally coming from a space of kind of empathy and compassion. And I know the argument has been made around that, which is the biological basis, which is the fact that we're engineered to be mothers and we're engineered to care for little creatures, little babies, and that the necessity of that is being hyper attuned to if they are suffering, if they are not in a state to be able to communicate those things well. So we have to be able to look at these babies and be able to go, my compassion drives me to fix whatever you need fixing, to feed you if you need feeding, to cuddle you, to protect you, and so on. And men maybe don't quite have that same drive because they need to do other things, as we've been talking about before. There's kind of differences in roles between men and women. And then we have the added layer to all of this. And I think there is somebody who is it? Should think about who the person is. There's a woman who has done a lot of research on this, and she was on a trigonometry episode. So I would love to credit her, but she was saying that it's because also you have a lot of women who don't have children. So they've got this kind of masses of empathy and compassion, and they've got to put it somewhere, and they don't have children to put it to. So they're looking at all these different social causes around the world and letting themselves feel affected. And I think also what you mentioned about social media is another very interesting point, because social media can then take us into spaces and give us access to information about things that we would not have had before in the same amount. So suddenly every day you can open up a social, X or Twitter or Instagram, whatever, and you can just get a plethora of stories of what's going on in the war. The whole thing about Israel, Palestine, where suddenly we were all able to see a lot more about what's happening on the ground in a war. And so suddenly, there's images of things happening that, of course, are going to touch your heartstrings, but you would not have had the same kind of thing if you were a woman during the Second World War. You're not getting those same images, constant updates, that's not there in your face all the time. And similarly with other different social causes, it's a lot more accessible to us, all of those different things that we should feel something about. So okay, we've got all of these different levels. And then there's another aspect that I wanted to bring into our conversation, which is I think that women's need to create community and to create and that we work in terms of social organization around groups and your position in the group, and that's where you get your sense of safety. And so what women often weaponize is the ability to ostracize somebody or the ability to include somebody. So I think that that's also a part of what's happening in these different spaces. But okay, so I've gone a little bit off tangents, but let's come back to kind of kernel of truth. So listening to something like the conversation between Charlize Theron and Alex Cooper in the Call Her Daddy podcast, I think it was interesting where there are a couple of things they talked about. How, Charlize was talking about working in Hollywood and that industry, and how she went to this director's house the one time to be invited because she was potentially going to get a part. And I think that there has been something in the women's movement about calling out these imbalances of power between men and women, and calling out those bad practices within the workplace. I think that there's a kernel of truth, and the sense of, women fighting to be treated equally, to not be taken advantage of, to not also be pressurized in those kinds of ways in order to be able to advance in their careers. What could also be, another kernel of truth, I think, like what you're saying, if there are groups of people, if there are people who've been oppressed and subjugated and treated horribly, the empathy, the compassion that is triggered in women, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. We should care about people who are in difficult circumstances, who have been treated badly, and we should want to improve things for people. Now, where is the line between being compassionate? Because I think you said that you're trying to be more compassionate and also look at these women that we might judge and go, you're being too compassionate. And we're looking to find the compassion within ourselves to go, okay, before I judge you and before I put you in a box, let me fully try to understand where you're coming from. But I also feel like my journey is on the opposite side. I feel like I've been too compassionate and too understanding. And I would like to start calling people to account and start being like, right, okay, this has gone too far. The pendulum has swung too far. Can we all bring ourselves back a little bit to reality? So, yeah, what do you think? Do you think those kernels of truth resonate with what you've observed in these sorts of spaces?
I like what you said, that it's not about the fact that we need to go back to a time where there were issues and we just have to overlook them. It's that it's just overcorrected and people are now trying to pull back to the middle. I think what came up for me, what's becoming dangerous, is that people in positions of power have found a way to weaponize the compassion and empathy driven by women. So there was a statistic around, I think you mentioned it before we had to restart recording, specifically around the Green Party and getting a lot of their votes from women because it appeals to them. And I think there's also a sort of, in some cases jokey, in some cases not, there's this thing of, well, it's been really dangerous to allow women to vote because they're voting with their hearts and their compassion and not, for not looking at the things
not
that
based
matter.
on policy.
Based on policy, exactly. So there's that whole idea going around is, at the end of the day, and then I think I sent you that thing around equal rights, and that lady, I need to get in it, Phyllis or something.
Phyllis Schlafly.
Yes, who brought to attention the fact that actually equal rights can be very damaging to women, and recognizing the fact that whether you like it or not, women are vulnerable, and by creating a level of equality, you can endanger or create spaces to put those women potentially in harm's way. So while the idea is good on paper, the outworking of some of these things actually shows that it's not. But who does it benefit, right? And I think that's what we're trying to get at is, yes, whether it's misguided or not, maybe there is an intention to genuinely, and I know I can be quite soft on this, but I think I'm also trying to teach myself to be more soft on this, is, there is a desire from when we see these people standing up for what they think is right, because I think that's the other thing I want to draw attention to is, um, when you genuinely believe that someone is being harmed and you want to stand up for that thing, I kind of have to, I know I'm going to get so much backlash, and I'm even surprised I'm saying it, but I am actually genuinely impressed that there are like a lot of women over 60 and 70 in the streets protesting ICE. I kind of look at them and go,
Yeah.
wow, you're standing up for something, at least, like
Yeah.
misguided, maybe not very informed, but I mean, putting yourself into that, you know, fine, but
Yeah.
like something just, misguided. However, on the other side, because we're going to keep circling back to on the truth
Mm.
side of it and then the negative side of that,
Mhm.
again, I do think it's been used to put the wrong people in positions of power.
Yeah.
And I think it has been abused because, to my point of women being vulnerable, it is then easier to manipulate people like this who are compassion driven to then
Mhm.
vote or align themselves to causes that maybe ultimately, because they're not necessarily looking at the bigger plan or policy that's taking place, they're just truly believing that whatever the cause is, they're there to help people because
Yeah.
that's what they're being told. They're like, but if you support this, you will help these people. And they're like, well, I just want to
Yeah.
help people. Um, but I think that's where it's getting a little bit dangerous, and that can be on a very small scale. That doesn't have to be on a massive political scale. Like you
Yeah.
said, women create social, organized environments, and so when you realize the influence you can have on
Mhm.
helping them decide who stays in and who stays out, because that's an innate sense of, okay, cool, we're creating a safe circle, and these are the people
Mm.
that are in and these are the people that are out. You start
Mm.
that in very small environments. The impact of that on a larger scale is what it is, but that's really the negative side of it.
Yes. I think it's interesting the point that you're saying that it's been weaponized as a way to leverage certain things into power. I mean, if you think about we could go down a whole rabbit hole here, and I don't know if I'm ready to do it. But of course, there are conspiracies about certain groups of people that want to create a certain kind of order, world
Mm,
order, right? And we've talked a little bit about things like the push for globalization when we talk about immigration and the kind of eradication of the kind of community to make it just little individuals. And there's all those sorts of movements, and we know that there's kind of, for example, the Fabian Society in the UK,
mm,
and I think someone recently commented on one of our videos and was talking about the Frankfurt School, and all these things that have trickled down to create the woke ideology. There's also those who would be pushing for communist societies, ones who were after the fall of the Soviet Empire dispersed, regrouped, and have been
mm,
pushing a particular kind of agenda. And I think perhaps women have been this very useful group to tap into to push forward certain ideas, to then create certain societal models. And I suppose what I find difficult is the idea of there's women as a group and then there's some kind of nebulous society here that's
mm,
using them, because I think they are as much a part of it as they are. It's something that functions together and
mm,
takes advantage of each other. And of course, from the time of Phyllis Schlafly, from the women's vote and so on, and we've seen this change in women's role in society and how women have been able to, for example, to educate themselves, to then live perfectly solitary lives, professional lives with their cats and so on, and step out of the traditional family model. Again, I'm thinking of someone like Charlize Theron, who says,
mm,
she doesn't want to get married and she would like a long-term commitment, but actually wants the ability to be able to get out of it if she can. More than happy to
mm,
be a single mom and live that particular life. But her career is the thing that brings her lots of joy. And so
mm,
there are more and more women who are living that sort of lifestyle. And that's very convenient then, because if we're talking about the untapped compassion and the untapped empathy that women have, and they're trying to place it in places and they don't have those family units, well, that is a very useful political resource if you want to push forward your agendas. And I think things like, like women, the fact that the Green Party would have won or would be the dominant party if it was only women voting. And I see people sharing this on Instagram, like a great kind of, of course, because women hold the inherent wisdom and knowledge of the human race. And if only we allowed women to rule, then everything would be okay. And I think that, but if you looked at the policies of the Green Party, do you think that that would actually be in the interests of women? When I see them aligning themselves with the Islamists, I don't think so. That doesn't seem to me like something that would be in the interest of women.
Or
You could go
again,
down the
those
whole.
particular women, right? So what we're saying is there's a particular conflict between a certain demographic of women standing up for the rights or the inclusion or the implementation of ideologies that ultimately don't benefit those particular women. Because we can play devil's advocate and say, oh, there are communist women that are absolutely so excited for communism,
Sure. And of course, there were women in Iran, for example, when there was the Iranian Revolution, and it was historically the same sort of thing where the leftists and the Islamists were in bed together. And then as soon as the Islamists got into control, they were like, cool, thanks. You've done our work for us. And now we don't need you anymore. And everybody needs to be in their full hijab, and there shall be no singing and dancing of women, and women shall have a completely different role in society. And I'm sure that there are definitely those women who would be very conservative and would have been thrilled about that. So you're right, but I think we can still make the point that those policies are not necessarily in the interest of women in general as a kind of population. It's also things like the trans rights movement and how women have been so strong in pushing the whole part of gender ideology, and it really has come from that position, as you're talking about, this compassion for somebody who's suffering. I really feel like this is also a key thing. If you can understand what the base assumptions are, you've talked a lot about values, but I also think we can connect values to base assumptions. So if I really do believe that in terms of biology, there are multiple sexes, then I can follow along that whole belief system to then see somebody who's being oppressed because they are not, they just want to live in a different gender to what they were born with, and it causes them so much suffering. And like I can see the thought process that you could go down, and I can understand that sense of empathy. I think for me, though, I think we've reached a point where it's not enough to look at those groups of women and be like, oh, it's just because you're so empathetic and so compassionate.
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate because we all know what I really think, and I'll jump on that horse.
We need that.
I'll jump on that horse. It's trust me. I'm like, I think underneath this table, I'm like, play the best case scenario role, because that's how we create robust thinking. But obviously there are, there are all sorts of other thoughts going on in this head. Yeah.
No, well, I mean, so I think we need to, because, okay, what's the effect of just letting women, just letting this go without any kind of checks or balances or controls over these things?
So this is where we go.
Pushback. Yeah, exactly.
So I think this is where, so we can say, okay, cool. Best case scenario, we understand compassion, you're not actually crazy. You don't really want to just scream in your car and run over ICE agents. Like, that's not actually what you're about. You've just been driven to this. Okay.
And you fully believe in what it is that you're fighting for.
And you fully believe what it is.
It makes sense to you in your head.
It makes sense to you.
With the information that you've also consumed.
Yes. However, the filter you've been using, if we see it from this thing, is you are using compassion and empathy, which are not the filters you should be using. What you should be using is truth and morality and more robust frameworks. And I think the breakdown is that a lot of the ideologies that want to be implemented, let's say, against capitalism, against free society, against, society,
traditional families,
conservative values, the reality is they don't actually align themselves to the same values. So there is, you almost can't appeal to people to implement those ideologies without exposing the fact that they will ultimately not benefit those people. And I think that's where I get frustrated, is the what you're not realizing is that you're actually allowing what should be a really beautiful thing, is to take care of things that are weaker than you. You're allowing that to trick you into not really fully understanding or unpacking what it means to have a full breakdown in what is truth, what is morality, what is good, what is helpful for society. Because we do have examples of the outworking of some of these ideologies. They don't end well. They never end well. That's just a fact. I think if we didn't have case studies for them, there could be a lot more arguments for, well, let's just give it a go. But we've given a couple of these things a go. They
but
didn't
communism
work.
has never been tried properly. It's never been given its moment to flourish.
Because it's not ultimately aligned to truth and reason and logic and morality.
No.
And those are massive terms that I'm just loosely throwing out there. But I'm hoping that whoever is listening to this there's enough content on this. We don't actually need to unpack it. If you've watched enough, talks by Douglas Murray, or by Kissen, or by any of these men, they will very, very comprehensively unpack why these ideologies are not aligned. And so my point is, it's such a disservice to not actually question more than the empathy. Apply the empathy, but also then recognize that you are ultimately getting tricked into aligning yourself to ideologies that do not uphold good things. They appear to uphold good things, but they don't actually uphold good things.
So there's the question, which is, why is it that women in general have been led down a path which is less about truth and reason, and is more about emotion and feelings? And is that just simply because our kind of personalities, our biological makeup is made to go more in terms of the emotional direction? But obviously the two of us, the fact that we exist and the fact that we think that the way that we do proves the example incorrect. So what is it about us that has enabled us to see things differently, in order to, that we've been able to go, okay, I can feel all the feelings, I feel all the compassion for things, but I'm also being able to step back and go, well, what is the truth of this situation? And what is the reality of the situation? I wonder, I have a few hypotheses I'd love to put to you. So the one thing is, I think there's a point maybe to be made about the lack of religion, and perhaps the sort of stepping away from the church, or the lack of spirituality, that maybe through our particular generation, we've stepped away from that. And I know that this might be ironic, because religion and spirituality is very much a belief kind of space, right? In my vision, and we can have this conversation another time. But I think that Christianity, one of the key points about Christianity was the idea of truth. And that's one of the things that the Enlightenment was based on, and a lot of like Western civilization grew up from this idea of looking for the truth, and the scientific method and so on. All of that developed. That's thanks to Christianity, or Judeo-Christian ideas and values. And I wonder if, as there has been a kind of separation of the church, or a separation from religious systems and communities, that's one of the reasons why women's, they need to tether themselves to something else, or they've lost a framework through which to think and look at the world. So that's my first hypothesis. What do you think? Does that resonate?
Did we talk about this in our last podcast? Now I can't remember. I'm going to talk, and then you can,
Okay.
We actually,
Go for it.
We actually had a sermon about this 2 weeks ago on self-identity and the danger of self-identity. So ignore the word sermon, please. Just whoever's listening, just listen to the rest of this, because it's good stuff. Okay. Self-identity. So what are some of the problems when you don't have a greater identity? And I think this links back to national identity, Christian identity. You belong to God, you're created by God. Any kind of identity, let's say, that exists outside of your house. There's a drive towards self-identity.
And I was just going to link it to our identity through our father figures, which is what we were talking about last week. Cool.
Yeah. So you have any kind of foundational identity from which to pivot. And what you're saying is
Mhm.
when you're untethered, you
Mm.
create your own self identity. What is the problem with that?
Yeah.
Well, then you become your own authority. And I'm going to credit
Mm.
Steve from One City Church. I don't know what the sermon is called, but it was, go
Yeah.
listen to it. And he says the problem with that is then you become your own authority. And why is that a problem? Well, because you get to decide what's right and wrong on any given day, on any
Mm.
given mood. There isn't something
Mhm.
externally uh, strong outside of you to help you navigate particular things.
Mhm.
And then there's an unraveling, because then there's a reckoning for when you're making decisions and
Yes.
justifying those decisions to self-serve, it all just kind of, spirals down. Um,
Really like that because when you're put under moments of stress, you need to have something bigger than yourself, something stronger than yourself to be able to lean on or look to for a
yeah.
sense of guidance, safety, security, and reference, I think, as well, to go, right, I see these things that are happening, but I need to be able to root myself in something that I know that is true. And if you are the one who is constantly constructing the truth and constantly, shape shifting, which I think is really interesting to link to the ideologies that have been in the universities and the education systems, which have been all about breaking down the idea of objective truth and creating subjective truth, which then, links to what you're saying. So you can create, not only do you create your own identity, but you create your own truth and you could create your
Oh, that
own.
was the other thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
When you create your own identity, you need external people to validate it. And that's where you
Yes.
see the woke movement and all these other things,
Yeah.
is because you're
Yeah.
not actually
Yeah.
sure. And so there's still this external need to seek validation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's again a problem, because then you're forcing people to tell you that what you believe is
Mm.
true, instead of a truth that exists outside of you.
And isn't that also, that's a particularly female thing, right? Again, to go back to our point about how women are a lot more collective in terms of the way we organize ourselves and the things that we value. We much rather value the opinion of the collective, the opinion of the group, and that external validation. That's why I think social media is it's taps so much into the female psyche. I'm thinking about the work done by, what's his name? I'm forgetting everybody today. Jonathan
It's just
Haidt.
our female
Jonathan,
brains.
exactly. Hormones. As Jonathan Haidt, right, and all of the work that he's done on how negative social media is, but also particularly on young women.
For women.
And and I think it's because of that external validation, which really we respond to, because it would be so. And I'm sort of thinking about us back in our like hunter-gatherer days, and imagining how the society and your safety is about being in the group. So it was the worst thing for you to be ostracized from the group, particularly like maybe men would be better than women being on their own because they're stronger. They have the capacity to survive rather than women, but women would need the group, they need the collective in order to look after themselves. So, brilliant. Okay, I feel like we're pulling together these
It's all
threads really
aligning.
well.
And I don't know if this
Exactly.
is too far stretched as a segue, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is too far stretched as a link. My husband drew my attention to the fact that I make very big leaps. And I said, well, for anyone who enjoys listening to us, they'll make the same leaps. I don't think
I
this
love
is a
it.
big one. Something you
Okay.
said back to the needing validation that is
Mm-hmm.
so problematic, and it ties into this aligning yourself to the wrong thing and not really seeing when you're
Mm.
being confused. So we spoke a little
Yes.
bit around the lie of have your career and then have children later, not actually
Mm.
coherent. The other
Yeah.
one that I was looking at, and it was again that Freya, is it Freya India?
Yes. I have
On
been, yeah.
the news, what is it called? The newsroom. So good.
I think
So good.
she's
That
great.
whole
Yeah,
thing
I've
was,
been really enjoying
so
her.
she
Yeah.
she was saying one of the biggest issues, and this is back to the Alex Cooper thing, is you're pushing certain ideologies while also holding back and making women feel less than in the other areas. So the example
Mm.
she used is
Yes.
body positivity, love yourself as you are, but also look at all these beauty products and look at how,
Yes.
and apparently the statistic for cosmetic surgery in women in their 20s now is higher than ever. and the
Wow.
fear of aging and
Of
the fear
course.
of, all of this stuff is as the years have gone on, have become more and more prevalent in younger and younger generations. Um,
Yeah.
and I look at that and go, yeah, but of course, because maybe my conspiracy brain likes to go, yeah, but of course, because that's, that serves the sexualized space. If all the
Yes.
worst things are rooted in money, sex, and power, then the money is paying for the
Hmm.
cosmetic stuff. The
Yeah.
sexualization of women in wanting to be young. Who are they wanting to be young for? Why so
Mm.
young? Problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then power again is, well, if I'm beautiful, there's a level of power. Or the worst side of it is, if I can make women feel ugly, then I'm in power.
Yeah.
And so again, it goes back to careful what you align yourself to, because we're not just talking
Hmm.
big ideologies like the woke movement or trans or,
Or socialism,
or
communism.
socialism, communism. This can even just
Exactly.
be careful what you align yourself to on, let's say, seemingly healthy things like, I don't know, even so the beauty industry, fitness. I mean, crisis.
Yeah.
I can't
Well,
I can't follow half the people because I'm just like, that looks exhausting, you know?
yeah. Well, I think this is great because there's here is this contradiction and places where I would sort of overlap with kind of a feminist movement is the
Mm.
feeling that there is such pressure on women to be everything. And it's that not only is there this pressure, as you say, from the beauty and the health space, to have a great body, to be extremely healthy, to be, getting, now it's all about, you're getting enough protein, are you getting the right amount of sleep, all of the different skincare things. Are we doing Korean skincare? Like, do you have a red light mask? Like, but then also there's that pressure of, so you have to be this lovely beauty queen, maintain your youth. And then simultaneously, you need to be a boss girl and you need to have the best career and you need to be super successful and you need to be running different businesses. And and then there is, I think, a kind of judgment around, have you got married? Do you have a good relationship? Either it's that, are you married? Do you have a good relationship? Or are you having lots of sex like Charlize
Yes,
Theron
I was going to
and
say, or are
sleeping
you
around?
sexually liberated from it all with
Exactly.
no
And not
children?
caring at
Yeah.
all and, don't have that pesky relationship or need to be loved or need to be connected or attached. So there's so much pressure. It's like, where, as a woman, where do I put myself in all of these things? Where do I find the space where I'm just enough in terms of my particular journey, and which movement do I align myself with? Do I align myself with the kind of conservative side and go, okay, yes, no, I want to get married. I want to have children. My husband will be the main breadwinner. I'm going to kind of go into the whole trad wife space as well. We'll have our homestead. I'll make bread all the
And
time. And
buy chickens that I want.
exactly.
Yes.
And pretend that I don't have any career ambitions or I don't have,
Mm.
those sorts of dreams. Or do I need
Mm.
to go on the other side and be like, it's all about my career. And it's all about also like maxing, this whole thing about like
Mm.
maxing myself. And so I've got my routines and I've got my health and I've got my skincare and I've got my this and I've got my girls, my social life as well. And so where is the space in the middle for the average, the
Well,
kind of
there's no
gray
market for the
crossover?
middle.
No, of
That's the
course.
thing. There's
Exactly.
no
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
And I spoke about this with my husband. He got very, very excited about this talk, and there are probably many things I'm going to leave out because I actually just couldn't remember all of them. But
Fantastic.
I was just saying that I wanted to share the same Matt Chandler series, A Beautiful Design, where I spoke about in the Manosphere talk. I don't actually know if I credited Matt Chandler, but I'm doing it now. So Matt Chandler, A Beautiful Design. I think it was 2016. He speaks about selfish passivity, selfish aggression, which we spoke about in the
Yes.
Manosphere episode.
Yeah.
Do you want to
I
know what
love
the
that concept.
woman thing version is?
Yes. Give it to us.
Because it's been interesting. I totally forgot about it until now, but it's been interesting to see
Yeah.
us talk and see, especially maybe someone who doesn't have this perspective, even with the
Mm.
self-identity thing. Like there are logical steps to
Yes.
these ideas. So do you want to take a guess what they could be? What are the two spectrums?
Um, I imagine maybe one side is a kind of selfish mothering, like an overly motherly type of, the what's the term? There's the something mother. the devouring mother. Is that
Uh-huh.
that's like a kind of mythological term that, and then I'd imagine that the other side would be this sort of the complete rejection of the mother and maybe the overly sexualized, the whore. I don't know.
Okay. So
Tell me.
interesting. It's not, it's worse than that. And I'll tell you why. It's comparison and
Okay.
perfectionism.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
why is that complicated? Because not only do we get told there is one way, a perfect way
Mm.
to be, we
Mm-hmm.
then also get told there are all these ways in which to be that, which is not
Mm-hmm.
true. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think a lot of the anxiety or frustration or what you were saying is, but this, and where's the middle?
Mm.
Well,
Mm.
no, because if the lie is you have to be perfect and all
Yeah.
of these things while comparing yourself to those who are getting it right and
Mm.
criticizing and pulling down those who are getting it wrong, isn't that a
Yeah.
wonderful way to then market all the
Yeah.
things we need?
Yeah. And you
Um,
keep women consistently unstable and
Mm.
uncentered. And oh, it's lovely that, we talked about being untethered before. So yeah, being untethered from their purpose and maybe their individual selves as well, because they're always attaching themselves to these other things through comparison and through the attempt to be perfect, and being perfect according to what standard? It's obviously an external standard instead of their own internal standard. That
So
makes a
if
lot of
this
sense.
was, I mean, I was trying to think, wait, is this an east-west and then there's a north-south? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, the analogy is actually not the same.
No.
So, so then, so then what is it? If we're looking at being anchored,
Yeah.
then what is that anchor? What is
Yes.
that
So
anchor?
I wanted to go into that. So, as we've been talking about all of these different problems in the femisphere and the things that women are dealing with, so what's our suggestion of a path forward? How can we kind of correct some of these things, the imbalances? Where do women find their anchor, and how do they navigate this world in which there is so much pressure to be everything? I also wanted to add one thing, that I think there's part of the pressure is also that women need to be like men, and that's again, as much
Comparison.
there's a lot in the kind of feminist space that I don't agree with at the moment, but there are
Mm.
some things where I could definitely, I'd get on board. And I think that I'm finding more and more, particularly as a woman, am understanding more about my body, understanding more about women's health issues and those sort of things. I start to feel that, yeah, that there is a problem around treating women just as though they're men. And so this movement that was all about equality in terms of we all are exactly the same, we're not exactly the same. And so the expectation that women need to work like men, women need to have a career like men, women need to behave like men as well. That's where also the Charlize Theron, the sort of sexual activity and like, oh, I can just sleep with anybody and it doesn't matter. It does matter. We have a different physiological response. We have a different process that we go through. We're not the same. We are of equal value and of equal worth, but we are not the same. So, okay, so going from that kind of position, how do we correct ourselves? How do we also bring women more to objective truth, to being able to
Yes.
assess things from this position of logic and reason, being able to deploy our empathy and our compassion to the right places, and also being able to, think with different parts of our brain about other things?
Maybe, my husband and I were talking about this, and he was saying, it seems very natural for a man to look at another man in how to be and to like
Okay.
follow that. He says, but do
Yeah.
women do that? And I said,
Hmm.
no, not really. He said, how do
No.
women then define success? Because for a man, it's
Mm,
there are certain things that define success, and you look to other men to establish that. And he's like, but I don't know if
so
women look
true.
to other women to do that. And I said, well, I
Yeah.
think that's part of the tension of comparison and perfectionism is
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
what it inherently gears us towards is to strike out on our own. And then I
Mm,
thought, I don't actually think it's about striking out on our own. I think it's that,
no.
like you said, if you look at the hunter-gatherer thing, um
Mm,
I like to, yeah, just as if we had to land on an island kind of deal, I think it is really helpful. I think that if because okay, let's just calm everyone down.
Let's get the brain to just slow
If
down
we all had to
and
just end up on an island where there's no contraception, and
yeah.
so we're recreating society, and so the the ultimate thing is that I would bear children, or women would bear
Mm,
children, our responsibility would be to the family. And
mhm.
so this kind of striking out, or having impact in the external world, is for a time not as big as family. And I'm talking in very simplistic terms. Okay, so you are raised under the protection of your father. You are then given over to the protection of your husband. Obviously, society has given, we don't have to say husband anymore. Like, society has created spaces for women to be protected and provided for, without a male role.
Yeah.
Um, and then you are given children. And again, you can choose not to do that. You can choose to still have
Mm,
impact in the world outside of your children. Um,
yeah.
but but I think he was drawing my attention to the fact that if it was, not like that. If your
Yeah.
responsibility is ultimate to your family, and then they have kids, then you help with the grandkids, and then you sort of help with, the great grandkids, or your position of authority and impact is family orientated more than
Mm,
what's happening in the world. You
yeah.
kind of are the queen of your own kingdom. You're not
Mm,
necessarily going out and, conquering other kingdoms. And I,
mm,
I thought that was quite an interesting thing, because what it means is maybe where our makeup is to take care of what we've been given. And
mhm.
why not? Like, why shouldn't we enjoy taking care of, our immediate physical sort of spaces, and our immediate people
Yeah.
around us, and our immediate community.
Yeah.
Why, even in doing this, because I was challenged by that. I was like, well, then why am I doing this podcast? Why don't I just focus on my family, and focus
Exactly.
on my immediate
Yeah.
community, and focus on my clients?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't hear what I'm not saying, which is like, don't go and may have an impact on the world. What I'm saying is, if it's not satisfying you, it's
Yeah.
probably because talking or working or doing those kinds of things is likely not bringing the same kind of satisfaction, that seeing the thing in front of you have your kids have you having a direct
Mm,
impact on your kids, or your society, or the person you're helping on the side of the road. Not just
mm,
talking
mm,
about it. I think that's my point, is not just talking about it
mm.
or crying out about it, but actually doing the helping. I think that's where, if we had to cycle back to the beginning of this, that's where I think there's a gap. Is shouting about it or protesting about it is not the same as actually doing
Yeah.
the dirty work.
Yeah. Hmm. So I'm listening to you, and I think that there's, again, it's just really nice the fact that it's the two of us where we're from, where we have very different lives,
Mm.
and I'm looking at myself, and as a woman without a family, no children, none of those things, and I think there's that is the question of, is it the family that then, because if I'm going back to this question about what is the anchor that women can bring themselves to, that then they're able to operate in the world without being influenced by these particular forces that are pushing them into one direction or another, how can they anchor themselves in a space to be able to think with reason and truth, but then
Mm.
also to deploy their empathy and their compassion? And I think that being rooted in a certain identity, like what you're saying, I think that definitely the sense of understanding your role within the family, and understanding that there is this understanding that
Or
biological
community.
need, yeah,
Mm.
that biological need to be looking after, to be caring for, and so on. But until you have that, I think there's something fundamentally deeper, in a sense,
Okay.
beyond roles, and beyond roles of things, activities that we're doing, because I think equally you could have the go out and make an impact in the world, and go out and do certain things, and that's the thing that's going to give you an anchor. But I wonder, again, I feel like that's still too superficial for me. I think that I don't I don't know the answer. I'm trying to kind of talk myself into maybe what I think the answer is. I don't know if it's a sense of quote unquote doing the work on a deep and profound level to really be able to understand yourself and to be able to understand your behaviors within a certain context, so you're not necessarily being reactive all the time, but instead you're being proactive. If you're reactive, then you're letting the outside world constantly push you in certain directions, and that way you can then be influenced to follow certain ideologies or to be part of the group. But if your center of action is internal and it's more proactive in terms of this is how I'm going to be in the world, or this is how I'm going to interact with the world, this is how I'm going to think about the world. If something comes to me, I will think and I will process it, and then I will do something with it. Maybe that can be a stronger anchor. And I don't know if
Is that not
comes...
just identity, and that comes down to a deep sense of, I mean, it's so, I never know where to go with this, because I try, and maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should just speak from a Christian perspective. But
Yeah.
ultimately what I'm hearing is, if you understand who you were created to be and what that looks like, and you're not deciding that for yourself, that's, there's an identity that, if you believe that there's an identity and a calling and a purpose that you were called to, and what I mean in that is, like, I'm not saying that a woman's role is only her family, her impact, her immediate community. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't fight against that, if that's actually like a place of, if that's the calling
I
that's
totally
been
agree.
given.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know, this woman, Phyllis, who did incredible things, like Harvard lawyer, mom of 6 children.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
hear that so flippantly. That is not a joke. That is not a joke.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I'm sort of ultimately hearing is, having a deeper sense of purpose, not
That
trying
is...
to tack on a purpose. And that's, I think, my frustration with a lot of these movements, is you're obviously searching for something greater than yourself. You're not necessarily, you may be missing the fact that you actually have an ability to do that within your immediate environments. And I mean, I've heard this before, the people joke about it and comedians joke about it. And I think there's truth in there, but I think we can be kinder, is maybe a lot of these women have also, they believe the lie of don't have children, don't do any of that stuff. And now they're left in older age without any of that, for better or for worse, whether they chose it or not chose it. But ultimately there's a space.
It's not their fault.
It's not always their fault. There's a space to be filled, and a deeper sense of purpose that is getting misused. I mean, as you were talking, I think as a woman, we were speaking about the responsibility we have to encourage men and actually be these supporters. Like, biblically, we're designed as helpers, which is going to upset so many people. But actually, there's a great thing in being a helper. Like, there's an amazing thing in stewarding that, and creating beautiful internal spaces, creating beautiful external spaces, being supportive and encouraging, including people instead of excluding them, not gossiping, not ostracizing, actually being the kind of glue that brings a society together.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the thing, that actually we need to create more safety for women to be able to question and to be able to think a little bit more laterally about the different movements and the different ideologies and the different information that they're being fed. I think that women can, as we were talking about, women's role for men is to do more upliftment of men, more encouragement of men, more of that positive energy towards them. But we could do the same to ourselves, in the sense of not letting ourselves fall into the negative sides of our nature, which is to be very quick to jump onto somebody who thinks differently to us, to be very quick to ostracize. Exactly. And so maybe if there is within the female space, if there's a little bit more safety given and expressed to women that you can think differently, you can have your opinion, you're not going to be ostracized, you can question these ideas, you can change what it is that you want in life. If you want to be a mom and don't want to have a big flashy career, that is fantastic. If you want to have a great flashy career, that's also fantastic. To create a kind of safety around that, and to be more conscious of when those negative aspects of ourselves come forward, in terms of the judgment, in terms of the ostracization, and in terms of the kind of black and white thinking around things that, we're thinking about them emotionally, but really we should be thinking about them logically. Maybe that's
Well, I
what we
think
can do.
just to summarize, I think you said something quite key, is where men need to create safety in terms of fatherhood or leadership or mentorship or, uh, being ahead of and leading the way. What I'm hearing from you, which is such a beautiful feminine picture, is creating circles of safety where differences can
Yes.
be. And that's almost the
Yeah.
response to perfectionism and comparison, is come as you are,
Totally. Yeah.
imperfect,
Yeah.
and come as you are with all your differences. And
Exactly.
be in conversation so that we don't end up being pitted against each other
Yeah.
to bring about very masculine, pro-masculine ideologies.
And very anti-women policies, anti-women programs, and anti-women ideologies. I agree. Thank you for listening to the Perspicath podcast. If you enjoy our discussions, please remember to give us a like or subscribe, and maybe share it with a friend if you think that they would enjoy it. As always, stay curious.